And so the Gemara started on page 58, and it was explaining the Mishnah. What we're really dealing with is that the fact is that the Mishnah is redundant because the Mishnah repeats itself. It says three people that ate together can't divide up, and that already it said in the beginning of the chapter. The same line. The Mishnah on page 45a, it said three that ate together, chayavin lazamin. So it's not exactly the same words, but basically means the same thing. That three people that ate together are obligated doing the zimun. And here it says three people ate together are not allowed to divide up. Basically means the same thing.
One is shlili and one is chiyuvi.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said because my sound was low. Say that again.
One is a positive way of saying it, and one is the negative.
It's a negative.
Way of saying it.
But the Gemara isn't satisfied with that answer. The Gemara wants to know, why does it have to say it? It's still considered redundant. So the Gemara comes up with, at least our version of the Gemara, there are a few different, this question as to if this is commentary or if this is actual Gemara. But basically, the way our Gemara has it is that there's three answers. And the first answer was that even if they didn't actually eat yet, they ate less than a kazayas, they still have to do a zimun. They can't divide up. What do you mean? I hardly ate. I just took a little bite. Nope. You're obligated doing the zimun. And the second answer was that they're not eating from the same loaf of bread. So they're, you could say, well, maybe we're not really congregating together for a meal because we're eating from our own sandwiches. And the answer is nope. You got to do a zimun. And the third answer is what the commentaries are all debating about. And that has to do with this case where three people ate together, but you had three groups, and one person from each group left their group. And the question is, can they now form a zimun, or do they need to form a zimun, or can they just separate? So again, these three people left their original group. Each one was in a different group, and they all left their group. They're now in their fourth group. They made their own new clique. And the question is, can they do, or do they need to do a zimun? Can they just leave without doing a zimun? And on this, we had two qualifications. One was that the original groups had three people in them. Each of the three original groups had three people there. So the understanding is you had an obligation originally of doing a zimun in the first place. And now you left that group and you went to you made your own group. But the thing is that you originally had an obligation on your shoulders of doing a zimun. And so that was the first qualification. The next qualification was on the next page, 50b, where it said that only applies if you didn't do this zimun in the first place in your first location. But if they already included you in the zimun in the first place, then you lose the zimun flies away. So the obligation of zimun doesn't apply. So on a simple level, basically what it's saying is, if you did the zimun already, you're exempt. If you didn't do the zimun already, now you're in this new place with these new people. You must do a zimun because you have a zimun obligation on you. You have to bench. So, so it does seem a little funny that you're doing a zimun, but you didn't really eat. You're not eating with this new group. So what does this mean that you're doing a zimun? And so the way Rashi understands what's going on is that you have an obligation to do a zimun. You were together with a group that should have done a zimun, and you left the group. And the thing is that because you left the group and you weren't included in their zimun, so therefore you have two obligations on you. You have to bench and you have to do a zimun because you originally were supposed to do a zimun, and so the other two guys that are sitting with you, they also have an obligation of zimun. So and to the extent that you're not allowed to leave, you really are obligated in doing a zimun, and you can do a zimun with these other two people. So that is the understanding of the way Rashi explains it. However, what would be in a case where you did a zimun already? What would that be? So the example Rashi gives is if you did the Zimun already with the first group, meaning you left the meal, you went outside, and they call you from inside and say, Rabbi Simon Benshin, they open up the window and they say, Yankala, answer with us. And he's outside, he's in the marketplace, and they give a scream, the Rabbi Sai, and he answers over there to the Zimun. Now, he answered to the Zimun already, what we tell him is, since you answered already to the Zimun, he didn't bench yet, so he's going to be benching later on when he comes back and sits down with two other people who did the same thing. They're also outside, and they answered with their group, Zimun, and now they all sit down together. The law is that they do not do another Zimun because they already did the Zimun, the original Zimun, they already fulfilled, and therefore they would not do another Zimun. And the term in the Gemara is that the obligation of Zimun flew away from them. They had it, it goes away, and it does not come back. Now, I did mention that it's not so simple to understand that wording. Why did the obligation of Zimun fly away from them? They did a Zimun. They answered to the Zimun. So this is one of the questions that the commentaries ask on Rashi, that, you did a Zimun already. They were outside. They answered to the Zimun, and now they have to bench, but they did answer to the Zimun, and now they came back to another place, and they found two other people in the same situation, and they're sitting together, and the law is, in that case, you don't do a Zimun. If they didn't answer in their original place, they would need to do a Zimun. So the question is, what do you mean? They did the Zimun. It didn't fly away from them. They did a Zimun. So the commentaries struggle with this in two ways of answering it. Either when you answer a Zimun and you don't bench, that's not called a proper Zimun. It's not full-fledged Zimun. The real Zimun is when you bench with the group. If you didn't bench with the group, it's not a real Zimun. And it's Zimun, but it's not the full proper Zimun. And therefore, the term it flew away from him, or from these three people, the obligation of Zimun flew away from them. In other words, the proper Zimun obligation flies away. They lost out in doing the proper Zimun. And so that's the simple understanding. That would be the understanding of Rashi. The other way of learning is along the same lines, but a little more extreme. And the other way of learning is the way Rabbeinu Yonah learns, and that is that when the Zimun, when you do a Zimun outside, and you're not with the group, and you're not benching, of course, you're doing the Zimun, you're I don't know, 200 feet away, and they open the window and they call out, and you do the Zimun with them. That answering of the Zimun, it only is fulfillment of the mitzvah of Zimun with the people who are sitting down and benching, not with you. You are not fulfilling your obligation of Zimun. They fulfill their obligation of Zimun, but you don't. Now that means that you're not fulfilling your obligation of Zimun, but the obligation of Zimun is going to fly away from you, and you're going to lose out in the Zimun. And that's the other way of learning. So the first way of learning I mentioned was that you fulfill the mitzvah of Zimun, you just don't do it. It's not done fully properly. It's not done with all the bells, whistles, and bells. You didn't fulfill it, in the proper way. But the second way of learning is that you actually do not fulfill Zimun for you. They fulfill the Zimun, you don't. Now, if you would be sitting down in the meal with them, and you're not ready to bench, and they say, Rabbi Simon Revel bench, and you answer with them, and you don't bench, but you did the Zimun with them, and you're sitting there, then there's no problem. Then you did fulfill Zimun, because you're sitting down with them, and even though you're eating afterwards, you're continuing to eat, and you're going to bench after, that is fulfillment of benching. But if you're outside, and you're just answering the Zimun, that's when Rabbeinu Yonah says that you actually don't fulfill Zimun. They fulfill Zimun, the other people, but you don't. You are allowing them to fulfill the Zimun because you're the third person, but they actually are fulfilling the mitzvah of zimun, you're missing out, and to the extent that it flies away from you, and you don't actually get that back to be able to do that zimun. So that's basically how we understand in Rashi. Yes, Ben.
Yeah, I wanted to say the way you're explaining it, he ate before and answered to the zimun, and then he comes to another group, or three that come to another group. But the Mishnah also tells us that they are not allowed to leave even if they didn't eat yet. Once you sit with three people, you're not allowed to eat. You're not allowed to leave without doing the zimun with them.
So there are different answers how the Gemara is given. One answer was what you're saying, that the Mishnah is telling you about the fact that they sat together and they ate a little. They didn't even eat a kazayas. They didn't eat an olive size, and they have to.
No,
they have
even
to
if they didn't eat, it says even if they didn't eat, they are not allowed to leave.
Okay, fine. Okay, so they didn't eat. The way we translated that was that they didn't eat the size of achila. Achila means a kazayas. That's how I translated it. Either way, but fine.
They didn't eat the legal size.
The legal size of eating. But that's one way of explaining it. The other way of explaining the Gemara is a different thing. Like it's not dependent on that scenario. It's a different scenario.
Okay.
So that's so those are the different answers of the Gemara. So now Taisus on the bottom of page 50A mentions that the people ate together and just one second. So Taisus mentions that they ate together, these three people, with the other group, and they answered the zimun, but they did not bench. And the law is that they are exempt from doing a zimun, and they're allowed to divide without the zimun because they did the zimun already. And the understanding is that they continued to eat afterwards in their place. So in other words, they're sitting, each of these three groups, they're sitting in a group of three people. They want to continue eating. So they did, they're continuing to eat, but the other two people in their groups want to bench. So the two people of each group bench, and the third person answers to the zimun, but he continues eating afterwards because he's still hungry. And then these three people who are continuing to eat, they decide, you know what, let's get together and let's sit down and schmooze. So they all get up and they sit down in their group. Now they ate after the original zimun. Now, because they ate after the original zimun, this is where Tosfos sees a reason for the Gemara to have to tell us that the zimun flew away from them. Tosfos is bothered with the question we asked on Rashi. Rashi, we said, what do you mean the zimun flew away from them? They did a zimun. They answered the zimun. Don't say the zimun flew away from them. They answered a zimun. They fulfilled the mitzvah of zimun. So we answered, well, Rashi has to learn that they didn't exactly fulfill the zimun. It was a quasi-zimun. They fulfilled it, but not the best way. It wasn't perfectly, or maybe they didn't fulfill it at all because they didn't bench with it. So we had a few ways of explaining in Rashi or Rabbeinu Yoina that they didn't exactly fulfill the zimun, and the zimun flew away from them, and they can't really do a proper zimun now. The way Tosfos is learning is, no, the zimun did fly away from them. how did the Zimun fly away from them? The Zimun flew away from them because logic will tell you, listen, I did a Zimun, I ate and I did a Zimun, I fulfilled my mitzvah of Zimun, but I also ate after the Zimun was over. I continued eating, and so did my two friends over here. We all continued eating after our group's Zimun was over. Now, our new eating that we ate after each of our groups was over, that food maybe should have another Zimun on this new food that we ate. And now that we are together with three people, and each of us ate after our original group did a Zimun, so there's room to say maybe we should now do another Zimun on the new food that we had eaten after our group did its own Zimun original. So that's what that's the way Tosfos learns. It says that on that new food, the obligation of Zimun flew away from them. They would be allowed to divide up because that new food, they're still in their first group. They're just continuing to eat. There's the Zimun they really fulfilled already, and the obligation of Zimun would not flies away from them. It wouldn't obligate them to do another Zimun. Yes, Ben.
Isn't there an halacha that you're not allowed to repeat a blessing for 70 minutes?
I'm not sure what that.
I don't know. I was told that you don't say the same blessing for 70 minutes. Like when you're eating a little bit here and then you eat a little bit there or whatever. So you have to wait 70 minutes before you can repeat the blessing. So I think in this case it would apply.
What you're saying, Ben, is there's a law that if you continue your meal, so you don't have to bench on the first meal because you're really continuing it. So the question is, how long can you say you're continuing your meal? So if 72 minutes is the amount of time that is called takes to walk a parsa, so that would be 72 minutes would possibly be a interruption of your original meal, and you'd have to start all over again. You can't. If you wait that amount of time, possible that you wouldn't be able to bench from the previous meal.
That's what I'm talking about.
Reminds me, I once had a comedian. He said that he has a trick that he never has to bench, because every 72 minutes, he washed once many years ago, and every 72 minutes he takes a little bite. So he still hasn't benched. But wouldn't the thing is,
that apply to this case where they want to continue eating somewhere else and want to bless again?
Yeah, the thing is that the Zimun, that would apply maybe if they benched already, or if they didn't bench, and would you consider it the same meal? But here we're just saying the Zimun part, which is we're about to bench, let's do a Zimun, which is a preparation for benching. You would say, now we're going to bench. Let's do a Zimun now for our, you know what I mean? Like this is a meal that wasn't included in the previous Zimun. So,
but you can't do it every 10, 15 minutes.
No. Every 10, 15 minutes means that the point is that if it's part of the same meal originally, or is it really something new? So if you bench on something, then you started something new, right? So if you have a piece of cake, you bench, and then 5 minutes later you decide, oh boy, I can't control my desire. I need another piece of cake. So you go to the kitchen. Do you say a bracha on the new piece of cake? Yes. You say an after bracha? Yes. And then you say, oh, I need a third piece of cake. Now, what do? You go to the kitchen and say another bracha. You continuously do a bracha because you benched already on the first one. You have to start again you have to make another bracha. That's the way it works.
No matter how much time passed.
Yeah. You have to make another bracha. If you didn't recite an after bracha on the first piece, that's when your law would apply. But here you did a zimun on the first food. You did your zimun. Now you're eating another. You're eating something else. There's room to think that maybe you should make a new zimun. And here Tosfos says that the way the Gemara is explaining it, if you did the zimun already, so even though you ate afterwards in the first seating with the first group, you're continuing to eat. They benched, but you're continuing to eat. Maybe that new food would require a zimun, and now that you're with two other people that did the same thing, maybe you should have to do a zimun. And on this, the the Gemara says that you don't have to do a zimun. So again, Tosfos is really answering the question that we asked on Rashi about the fact that the term that the zimun flies away, that it doesn't really flow so well. So in Tosfos, that's how he would learn. Now there is another interpretation of the Gemara that's exactly the opposite of the way we're learning, and it's from Rav Hai Goin. And the way he learns is that the Mishnah had said 3 people ate together, they're not allowed to divide up. The way he explains it is that 3 people ate together and, they're in different groups. They ate with their groups and they leave their group and they want to hang out with this other group. So the rule is that they're not allowed to divide and leave from their first group because they're going to miss out in the first zimun, in the zimun of the first of the. In other words, the Rav Hai Goin is learning it the opposite way. You don't make a zimun with the new group. You gotta go back to the original group and do your zimun. And so he says that if 3 people ate from 3 different groups, they're not allowed to do a zimun in this new place where they are, and where they're joining together. Rather, they have to go back to the original group that they ate with. Let me mute everyone. They have to go back to the original group that they ate with, and by doing that, they're fulfilling the obligation of zimun that they had with their group. Now, if there were more than 3 people with their original group, so then they would be allowed to do their zimun with their new group. But if there are only 3 people with their original group, they're going to ruin the zimun from their original group by leaving. So therefore, they have to go back and do a zimun with their original group. So that's the way he learns it. So it doesn't get into this whole messy situation where they're with the new group and their zimun from before works or so on. It's the point is, in other words, they're not doing a zimun with the new group. They're really supposed to be doing a zimun with the old group. That's the way he's learning it. So exactly the opposite of the way we're understanding it. Now, the question that we had asked originally is, well, how could they leave their original place and do a zimun in a new place? It would seem that you're not allowed to go out of your place, bench somewhere else. If there's not an emergency, you're not supposed to go and you ate a meal here and go somewhere else and leave. So some of the commentaries say that we must be talking about a case where there's an emergency. You had an emergency, you had to go somewhere else. And because of your emergency, that's why you're able to bench in the third place. And you have these 2 other people that are also there. So therefore, you would be joining them in a zimun because you had to leave and you had to go. There was an emergency. And so therefore, that's how there was an einus, emergency. But there are other ways of explaining it. Another way of explaining it is, this is a very large room. And you are sitting at one table, but according to halacha, if you go to another part of the room, it's not a problem. You're in you could go somewhere else and mention in the other side of the room. So that's how you could explain that this group, the zimun situation here is you were sitting at one table and you decided to move and go group up at another table. And here is where the halacha does not contradict this Gemara, because the halacha of not going away from your place of eating, as long as it's in the same room, you just change from corner to corner, that's not a problem. Another way of explaining it is that they ate something in their new place. And because they continued eating in the new place, so then they could bench in the new place instead of in the previous place where they originally ate. because they continued eating. They ate something in their new place. Another explanation is that the original people left. So if they go back, they're not going to be able to do a zimun. Here they have an opportunity to do a zimun. But the new place, the old place, they lost out in their ability to do a zimun because those people left already. And the other explanation is that if you left the place by mistake, according to some opinions, if you leave the place by mistake, you're not obligated to go back. If you, on purpose, in other words, you by mistake, you left the place. In other words, you didn't have in mind, I'm going to bench somewhere else, but you started walking away. Then you remembered, oh, I forgot to bench. Then you have this halacha applies. But if you left on purpose, you really should go back to your original place to bench. But in other words, if you left purposely, meaning I'm gonna, I still need to bench. You thought, you knew in your mind you still need to bench. So then you wouldn't be it wouldn't be appropriate to bench in a new place. Then you would really need to go back. Here we're talking about you left by mistake, you forgot that you didn't bench and so on. That's when you would be able to stay where you are in the new place and you don't have to return to the old place. You have all of these ways of explaining the Gemara, how it fits with the other halacha that you're not supposed to really leave when you are eating in one place. You really should bench in that place and so on. So you have all these ways of explaining and answering this. Okay, so that basically takes us through this Gemara with the explaining the redundancy of the Mishnah and how the zimun could fly away from you. In other words, you fulfill the obligation of zimun, and when do you need to do a zimun afterwards, and when don't you need to do a zimun afterwards. So now we're jumping to the next case, and that was that the two groups that ate in one house, if they see each other, they can be mitzdaref to a zimun. If they don't see each other, then they cannot be mitzdaref. They can't join together for a zimun. Has to do with seeing each other. And so now we're going to do that Gemara. It's where the two dots on the top of page 50b, and must be about 8, 10, maybe 10 lines down from the top of the page. 50b. Beis chaburos, two groups that they see each other, they can do a zimun together. Tana, we learned in a brisa that im yesh shamash beinehem, if there is a shamash, a server who's doing both of these groups, shamish mitzarfan, the shamish could join them together and make them considered like one group. And therefore, even if they don't see each other, it would seem that this shamish could allow them to join together to do a zimun. Now, this is very interesting because what happens in a restaurant, if you have an L-shaped restaurant where the seating is not exactly all together, and you want to do a zimun, would you be able to do a zimun if you don't see the other table? Maybe if it's one waitress or one waiter, maybe it has to be a waiter. Maybe the waiter, I don't know if a waitress can join you because the waitress doesn't count towards the zimun. I don't have to think about that. The waiter, if he's Jewish, now does he have to be Jewish? So is this a concept of the shamish being capable of benching and therefore he joins you, or the fact that there is a shamish that's serving both tables, it makes them considered like it's one group? It would probably be that it has to be someone who's capable of benching. That's probably what it means. I have to look it up in Shulchan Aruch. This is interesting. That the shamish can join you together. I guess he has to be someone capable of eating or benching. I don't know. I have to look it up. But
it has to be somebody that's not prohibited from doing the zimun.
We'll have to see. But the bottom line is the shamish joins you together, and you would be able to do a zimun even if you don't see each other. Now, Tosfos adds in that it actually applies even if it's two separate houses. Is if there's a shamish jumping from one house to the other, so he can join you together even if you're really not together. And he brings a source from the Yerushalmi as long as they can hear each other. Now, why did the Mishnah say that they're eating bebayis echad? Our Mishnah says they're eating in one house, and if they see each other, they can be joined with a zimun. Let the Mishnah say if they're eating in two houses. So Taisu says that if the Mishnah is trying to emphasize that if they don't see each other, even if they're in the same house, but they don't see each other, then they cannot do a zimun. Even in the same room, if they don't see each other, you can't do a zimun. In order to do a zimun, you need to see each other, even if you're in the same house. Now, it says that's why the Mishnah talks about a case where it's in the same house, because in the same house, it's emphasizing the point that even in the same house, you need to be able to see each other. But Taisus is saying, but what about the opposite case, where you're in different houses, but you do see each other? That also works. And it works even if you have a shamish that's serving in both of the places. He can join you together, that you're hearing the Berachas Hamazon, as long as you hear it from the person who's reciting the Berachas Hamazon. He will allow them to join together, and they could be Yotze the Zimun together with one as one group. So that's this very short little piece of Gemara. Now comes the next Gemara, and that has to do with wine. Ein mevarchen ala yayin. The Mishnah said that you don't recite a bracha on wine, bar priagafen, until you put water in it. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. The rabbis say that you can recite a bar priagafen on wine, even if you don't add water. So we're dealing with what is really wine. And I'm not sure how it worked in the olden days, but somehow the wine then was much stronger than the wine today, and they needed to add water to it. And if you didn't add water to it, it was not the ideal wasn't the preferable drink. And according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's not. You can't even recite a bar priagafen. Now the rabbis argued. They said you could, but it doesn't mean that they felt that was the preferable type of wine. It just means that they said you would still recite a bar priagafen. So let's start the Gemara here. Tano Rabbanan, the rabbis learned. So we're about 12 lines down from the top, 50b. Tano Rabbanan, the rabbis learned, yayin, wine, until you put water in it. You do not recite. You don't recite bar priagafen. Rather, you recite bayrei pri ha'etz. Now, the reason you would normally say bar priagafen is because the wine changes for the better. You've changed wine from being from simply being a fruit of a tree to now considered wine, this honorable drink. And but until it's in its state of honor, according to Rabbi Eliezer, or according to this brisa, it didn't reach that level of honor. It hasn't changed to that extent, and therefore it stays with its original bracha, the original bracha of Bayrei Pri Ha'etz. And you could even wash with this drink. You could use it to wash your hands.
After you added water, maybe.
No. We're talking about washing your hands for the meal, and according to Rashi, and you need liquid to wash your hands for the meal, and you could wash your hands with seemingly orange juice, apple juice. You could wash your hands with any of these liquids, according to Rashi. And the thing is, wine you would not be. The law of washing your hands is obviously water is good, but this is because it's not wine. It would be you would be allowed to use it for the bracha al netilas yadayim and washing your hands.
Oh.
Now there is a big question on this because the problem is that it does talk about dirty water. Can you use dirty water, colored water? Colored water can you use for al netilas yadayim? And normally, if water is dirty and it doesn't look like water, you can't use it for al netilas yadayim. So the Gemara says achzusa kapdisu, that there is a reason to be careful about. In other words, there's a law that you have to be careful about the color of the water, and how does the Gemara here say that you could even use this grape juice or wine that you didn't add water to? How could you use it for al netilas yadayim? So the explanation is that if it's water that's ruined, that's a problem. In other words, if it's dirty water. But this is not water that's dirty. This is an actual other drink that's not water that happens to have a color to it. So if it was water that is discolored, that is a problem. But if it's not discolored water, that would be, according to this opinion, it would be allowed to use for netilas yadayim. Now it says mishanasan l'seicha mayim, but if you did add water to the wine, now this is considered real wine. Mevarchen ala bar priya gofen. You can recite the bracha bar priya gofen, and you cannot wash your hands with this with this because this is considered wine. This doesn't fall into the category of like water. It's not similar to water. It's wine, and you cannot use it for al netilas yadayim. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. The rabbis say benkach or benkach, whether this way or that way. It is benkach or benkach, either this way or that way. Whether you put water in it, whether you didn't put water in it. Mevarchen ala bar priya gofen. You can recite the bar priya gofen, which is what we saw in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah basically said that the rabbis hold that you can recite bar priya gofen even if you did not add water to it, and you cannot use it for netilas yadayim. You can't wash with it, only water, and you would not be allowed to use this for netilas yadayim. Now, there is another way of explaining this Gemara. And the Gemara is not talking about washing your hands for the bracha of netilas yadayim, but rather it's talking about washing your hands for cleanliness. Now, if we're dealing with washing your hands for cleanliness, so Rabbi Eliezer would be telling you that you're allowed to use this wine for washing your hands if you didn't add the water to it, because you don't have to worry that you're ruining food. It's not a problem. You're using it for a purpose. And the way they learn the brisa is it doesn't matter if you added water or you didn't add water. You can always use it for washing your hands, because if you have a reason to use it, it's not called wasting, being wasteful of food, because you're using it for a purpose. That's the way Rabbi Eliezer learns. The rabbis argue, and the rabbis would say, no, this is called hefsid oichel. You're considered to be ruining food and you don't use it to wash your hands for cleanliness purposes, that would not be appropriate. So again, that's another way of learning the Gemara, that we're not talking about Netilas Yadayim, but we are talking about washing your hands for cleanliness. Now, the Gemara continues and says, Kaman Ozla, who does the following statement follow? Hada Amar Shmuel, this that Shmuel says, Oisa Adam Kol Tzrachav Bepas. A person is allowed to do anything they need with bread. If you need bread for some purpose, and you want to use it, let's say, to lift up to put under your book. You have a book that you want to put on a slant, so you want to use the bread. Can you use the bread for other purposes than eating? Can you, use bread as a bedpost for your bed or something? I don't know, whatever you want to use the bread for. You want to know if are you allowed to use it for other purposes. Now, there's reason to say no, because this is one of the blessings that God gave you. And when you use it for a different purpose, you're ruining it. So, especially if you're putting it on the floor to use for some type of stand or something, you're not going to end up eating it afterwards. So you are degrading the importance of it. And what you're basically doing is disrespecting the bracha, the blessing that God gave you of sustenance, of food. God gave you this as a blessing, and you seem to be denying the appreciation. You're an ingrate. You're not showing gratitude to Hashem for the blessing that He gave you. So that would be a reason that you wouldn't be allowed to use it for other purposes. But it seems to be a subject of debate. And Shmuel here says that a person is allowed to use bread for things that he needs it for. Person is allowed to use it for whatever he needs it for. Called Tzarachov, all his needs, bepas, with bread. Come on, who does that follow? Rebbe Eliezer, this seems to follow Rebbe Eliezer, that you would be allowed to wash your hands with Tilas Yadayim, with wine that you didn't add water to. So you see that you could use foods for other purposes than what they are meant to be. There, it could be obviously it's meant for drinking, and you're using it for another purpose, but it's something that you need. So he says that is permissible. So that would follow the opinion of Rebbe Eliezer. It also fits with the other way we learned the Gemara, that Rebbe Eliezer is talking about washing your hands for cleanliness. Rebbe Eliezer said you could always use any wine with water, without water. You could use it for cleanliness purposes. So this opinion, this point that you could use bread for other things, that would also fit this opinion. That, in other words, this would follow Rebbe Eliezer's view. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Yossi bar Rabbi Chanina says, Moedim Chachamim Rabbi Eliezer b'kois shel bracha. The rabbis agreed to Rabbi Eliezer that the cup of wine that you recite the Berchas Hamazainan, that cup of wine, in other words, when you do a benching with a cup of wine, that benching, the rabbis agree, you don't recite the benching on such a cup unless you add water into that wine. Again, we're talking about the wine of the olden days, that it was very strong. They had to add water to it. And the thing is that you have to that cup needs to be, it needs to be good wine. You need to add water to it. So My timer, what is the reason? You need to have the mitzvah from the best. And water added, when you add water to the wine, that's the proper, even though the rabbis agreed that you could recite a Bar Priya Gofen on wine that you didn't add water to, but they agreed that that's not the ideal, that's not the preferable way of drinking wine. Therefore, you should really add water, and therefore you need to add water for when you're going to do a mitzvah with it. Your mitzvah is min hamuvchar, you need to add the water. Rabbanon. And according to the rabbis that say that you can recite a bracha, Bar Priya Gofen, even on wine that you didn't add water to, I mean, what are you going to use it for? How could you give it a bracha, Bar Priya Gofen? It's not drinkable. I mean, it may be drinkable, but it's not a good drink. What is it fit for that you're saying, oh, it's changed for the better? It's now wine. What do you mean it's now wine? It's not drinkable. It's not the proper way of drinking it. This is a change for the better. What is it fit for? L'may chazi, what is it fit for that you're giving it a bracha Bar Priya Gofen? So the Gemara answers, Amar Reb Zera chazi l'kuryoti. This wine that's undiluted, it's fit for some type of a medicine purposes. And because it's fit for kuryoti, you would recite a bracha Bar Priya Gofen. You could, it's considered wine. There are things that it could be used for, and therefore it is acceptable to be a special. It's called wine. You could call it wine. Now, so Rashi tells us that kuryoti is two words. He gives two terms. He says anumlis and aluntis. What are these things? So the one of them is that it was a mixture of wine, honey, and pepper. I'm not giving you any ideas over here. If you want to mix, you can try it maybe with a cheap wine, but I don't know how good it's going to taste. But the anumlin was a mixture of wine, honey, and pepper, and aluntis was old wine and water and some other spice, maybe saffron or something. Anyway, they would drink it after they would go from the Beis Hamerchatz, after they would take the bathing after they went to in the olden days they had a special location where they would take their showers, baths. So after they came out of the bathhouse, they would drink it to cool off the body. Now, the question on this Gemara is, so this wine, it's undiluted. So we're basically saying that it's not really a honorable drink yet, right? It's undiluted. But we say, well, the rabbis say you should recite a Bar Priya Gofen, even though it's undiluted, it's not honorable yet. And the reason is, you know why? It's not honorable because you didn't add water. But you know why you can say Bar Priya Gofen? Because people add pepper and some other liquids to it, and the other they add the honey and the pepper and the other some spices. So it's considered that it's special. It's special because you could add stuff to it. You could also add water to it. What does the Gemara have to say? Because it's good for kuryati, because the kuryati you're going to add stuff to it. It's good because you can add water to it. In other words, at the point now, it doesn't have anything added to it. So is it Bar Priya Gofen? The rabbis say yes. Why? They say, well, you could actually add spices to it. It's good for like a medicine drink. That makes it good now. You didn't add the stuff yet. You didn't add the stuff yet. And I could say the same thing. You could add water to it. Why is adding those spices it'll make it into some medicine drink and make it considered wine? Why is that make it more wine than the fact that you could add water to it, but you didn't yet? and we're going to consider it wine. We're going to consider it acceptable to be wine. So in order to answer this question, you have to say, or at least one of the ways of explaining it is that they would add a small little amount of these type of spices. They didn't add a lot. And so therefore, because you just add a little of it, it's considered wine even now. Now it's considered wine because you could add a little pepper, a little this. It's a tiny amount. Water, you need to add 3 times as much water. That's a huge amount of water. That's changing the entire drink into another drink. So because the fact that you could add water to it, that's not going to make it considered wine. That is considered like a whole new drink. You could make it into something else. Well, when you make it into the other thing, then you could consider it wine, and you could therefore recite the Bar Priya Gofen. But to add a little spices to it, and make it considered karyati, there's 2 types of drinks, medicine drinks, whatever, after you come out of bathhouse and so on. So that is considered wine even now, and therefore you could recite a Bar Pri Hagofen according to the rabbis, even on this wine that's undiluted. So again, the way it's supposed to be diluted is 3 times as much water. You have 1 portion wine and 3 portions plus 3 portions of water, and that's a very large amount. It's considered like something new. It's a whole new entity. And with regard to these spices and stuff, it's a small amount they would add into it. Therefore, it's not a problem. Now, I will tell you there is another way of explaining the Gemara, and the way the Meiri explains it is that the wine you didn't dilute it, but it's still good. You know what it's good for? After you have something very spicy. Kuryati, according to the Meiri, means that after you eat something very spicy, you want wine that's undiluted. So because it's edible, it's drinkable for this purpose, that makes it considered wine. I'm not exactly sure. Again, I don't know if any of you have had any very strong wines ever and understand these what this refers to. It does seem like we're not so familiar with this, how you have such a strong wine that you needed to add 3 times as much water. The only thing I could think of is maybe something like a vodka or something. Maybe they do make some vodkas out of grapes. In fact, it becomes very complicated halachic issues because if it's made out of grapes, it's a problem of yayin nesach. So you have to always check vodka. A lot of people think, oh, all vodkas are kosher. There are vodkas that they make out of grapes, actually, and that would be a problem of a non-Jew touching it or a non-Jew seeing it in the factory. Of course, there are many non-Jews, so such a vodka would for sure be prohibited to drink. But I'm just thinking maybe there's something to do with that. I don't know. Maybe that would be the type of drink we're talking about. Yes.
I think maybe it's very concentrated. Today, it's not that concentrated. They control it in the bottling.
Right, I understand that. I'm wondering if anyone has ever found anything that's not the way we have it now. That you would have it concentrated.
Homemade.
Where would you find such a thing? What? What did you say?
Homemade.
Homemade.
My mother used to make liquors and wine from grapes.
And did she add a lot of water afterwards?
It was more like a syrup. You know?
Really?
And you had to add water to it.
And you're not talking about the liquor. You're talking about the wine. The wine she would add water to.
From grapes. It became like a syrup. I don't know how she made it.
Interesting. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm trying to. Interesting. So anyway. My thought is that just like sometimes people like after their herring, they have a drink of vodka or something. So here it seems like the opposite. They would have the vodka. They would have a lot of people after they drink vodka, they have herring, right? They have a hot pepper, but here it's the opposite. Have the hot pepper, you have the herring after you have hot pepper, then you have some type of vodka afterwards, like this wine. It's very strong.
One more thing, Rabbi. I know that Romanian people, they like to add water to the wine. They call it spritz. The drink itself, they call spritz instead of wine.
And it's not just like a soda type of carbon,
Yeah, you can
some
add
type
water
of a
or carbonated water, and then
carbonated
it's
drink.
called a spritz. A spritz.
Right. Interesting. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, this is the time